By the time Grace brought my tea the following morning, the shop was already crowded. I'd meant to arrive before she opened to secure a private word before the men filtered in and claimed her for the morning's trade. Instead, I found them already gathered at the door, waiting their turn in a line along the curb. My table near the window remained untouched, as it always did. No sign marked it, and no instruction was given, yet it remained vacant all the same. When enough men owe you, preference has a way of becoming practice. I had scarcely sat before she brought my tea and arranged it as I prefer it, down to the angle of the spoon against the saucer. Because affection, when it is real, lives in precision, not in repeated declarations of love, but in the quiet observance of small things like this. She leaned closer to set the plate of toast to my left, and my fingers met hers in thanks. The contact lasted only a heartbeat, but it was enough to last me until the next opportunity. For years I denied myself even the smallest comfort from a woman. No idle flirtations, no borrowed warmth in darkened rooms. Discipline ceased to feel like a sacrifice and became a matter of order instead. If she had been forced to endure the world without me, the least I could do was remain untouched by it. To want and refuse was its own devotion. Her skin against mine undid my discipline in an instant, though. It wasn't dramatic, no visible start, no intake of breath, only a quiet surge travelling the length of me, one body answering another body. I withdrew first, for I couldn't risk allowing the contact to linger. Sweetness, when one goes without it too long, becomes dangerous. It tempts indulgence, a luxury I hadn't yet earned. We shared a smile before I returned to the papers before me, lest I entertain the far more reckless temptation of prolonging the moment. A few account summaries lay open before me. Some holdings performed well enough to be left undisturbed. Others had grown complacent, yielding little of consequence. Nothing essential that would be missed if put to better use. Released strategically, they would provide her with every comfort she'd been denied. Clothes fit for her station, jewellery selected at her whim, and eventually a house in London once she chose it. Hearing her laugh, I looked up and found her beside Sean, finishing the cake I commissioned for the gala. The work suited this version of her well enough. Yet I was impatient to see her restored to the life that properly belonged to her, to indulge her without apology and allow every woman in England to burn with jealousy for it. For that privilege I'd happily let those weaker investments go. It was nearing noon when the doorbell rang, and I heard Cyril say, "After you, dear." I glanced up from my ledger and saw him ushering in the seamstress I had arranged for Grace's gown fitting. Something in her presentation sat poorly with me, too loud and eager for notice with her low-cut blouse and bright red lipstick, no doubt encouraged by the men's courtesy, but an Englishman's good manners are not the same as approval. It was a kind of display a proper lady like Grace would never have engaged in, not even without memory to guide her. I stood to greet her, and Cyril's eyes widened, catching mine with a look that suggested I was on the verge of a mistake best avoided. But I failed to get his meaning, and when I didn't heed him, he turned towards the counter to intercept Grace instead of joining us. When I glanced towards Grace to call her over, I noticed the change in her at once. Her smile vanished. The colour drained from her, leaving the same horrid blankness I had witnessed the evening prior. Her focus rested not on me, but on the woman beside me. Jealousy. The thought was so misplaced it bordered on offensive. As though I would prefer some provincial tradeswoman, a colonist no less, when she was only 10 paces from me. I refused to indulge the absurdity and lifted my hand instead. Whatever bothered her about it would be dealt with later in private. Grace, if you will. But she didn't so much as acknowledge me. Cyril's hand came to his brow, though, his eyes closing as though he could not quite bear to watch the result of it. It was only then that I realized I'd missed something essential, plainly and in full view of the entire room. The spatula slipped from her fingers and struck the floor, and with it, a sudden drop from my chest into my belly, the instinctive knowledge that I'd wounded her in some terrible way. No, My mind had not yet caught up to what that thing might be, but my body understood it well enough as she hurried off towards the staircase. The sound in the shop silenced at once, chairs shifting as the men watched her retreat towards the staircase, but I only remained where I was, the miscalculation I had made settling into place with unwelcome clarity. I do not misread situations, and yet I'd done so now in the one arena where error was least tolerable. Whatever I dismissed as trivial struck her more deeply than I allowed for, and I couldn't pursue her without turning it into a scene that would serve neither her reputation nor my own. Cyril's eyes met mine, and something sharpened there. Interest, certainly, but also the keen recognition of opportunity. He knew the history, knew what was at stake for both of us, and he was not the sort of man to turn away from something that might place him near the center of it. So when I motioned towards the stairs, he didn't hesitate to run after her. I was prepared to give a brief clarification, sufficient to manage the matter without indulging it, when the doorbell interrupted me. "Stand to," a soldier called, and the entire shop stood as one. I turned to find Alistair stepping into the shop, 2 members of his formal guard following behind him. Through the open door, more men were taking positions along the street, their presence marking the issue as beyond the local authorities' reach. Alistair had kept her safe with admirable restraint, yet it was never equal to her station. What stood before us now was unmistakable, a public acknowledgement from the Crown that no one present could misinterpret. I felt a certain satisfaction in that, not for the spectacle of it, but because it restored proportion. Yet the difficulty was obvious. If the king's own blood had been left to serve biscuits in a frontier town, even temporarily, the Crown itself risked appearing weak, and once such an impression takes hold, it travels quickly. That demanded immediate righting. I gave the seamstress a brief motion towards the door. "You may go. Your services will no longer be required." Then I stepped forward to meet Alistair. "Commandant." I came to attention and saluted for the benefit of those present, and Alistair returned it before stepping close enough that his voice would not carry. "The order came straight from Buckingham Palace," he said, glancing towards the guards. "You depart Sunday morning under military escort. All communication with London will run through you from this point onwards." I expected acknowledgement once the necessary confirmations were complete. What I hadn't fully accounted for was the scale of it. The guards outside were hardly subtle, were they? "We should address this now," I said, turning to the men. "Gentlemen," I said, lifting a hand to still them, "what you have just witnessed requires explanation, and you shall have it." I clasped my hands behind me and gestured towards the staircase. "As you may have guessed, the woman who has been serving you these past weeks is one of the taken children. She is and will be the last of them." The words landed in the room as I expected they would, so I allowed the shock of it to settle before I continued. "But you should also know that she is Lady Grace Rowen of Blackmere, granddaughter of Princess Mary and cousin to His Majesty King Edward." Several of the men stared at me, some going pale, others exchanging uneasy looks before turning back to me. But the easy atmosphere from earlier evaporated entirely as they pieced together their interactions with her since they arrived. "As you know well, the royal family has never considered service beneath it," I said, "and Lady Grace is no exception. She told me just last night that it has been her pleasure to be a comfort to you when you are so far from home, but I regret to inform you that you will have to make your own tea from now on, because I will escort her ladyship home to England after the gala tomorrow." A few uneasy chuckles followed, and I let them, allowing a moment for the humour to ease the tension before continuing. "The Crown is aware of how Lady Grace has been treated here. Your care and courtesy reflect well not only on you, but on the nation you serve, and—" I gave a small shrug, because as much as it pained me to concede that she required protection from anyone but me, the reality could not be dismissed. "On a personal note, we at Blackmere are very grateful for how you have watched over her." The men returned to their conversations and football game on the telly, But my thoughts went to the staircase, aware that the real difficulty still awaited me. And while I calculated the reasons that might cause Grace to run off that way, Alistair's hand came to my shoulder as he passed me. "Go on," he said. "Give her the news while I see to what remains of the shortbread." The previous evening had left her confined to her bed, and I had no desire to provoke a second collapse by forcing too much upon her at once. Still, we were mere hours from departure, and certain truths about the nature of our relationship couldn't be postponed. So I moved towards the stairs, wondering how much more she could reasonably be asked to bear.